The following may contain plot spoilers for certain cartoons. Thank you.
Dragon? Are you in here? That's weird. I thought you would come and show us the latest list she has to do for Romance Month. It sounds like it was coming from the bathroom. Dragon, is that you?
Yeah, it's me. Would you even believe I was going over a list for Romance Month, and the candidates for this are absolutely deplorable that they just... Hold on!
Looks like we're going to need birth bags for this one.
Hello everyone! Welcome back to Romance Month, a small segment that I put into play. For some of you who are about to ask questions of what was going on earlier, I was going through Romance Month. And yes, this is usually the time of year where everyone gets lovey and dovey, but this is also a time where we can reflect on our relationships, both the good and the bad. You see, not everyone's gonna have a very wonderful and happy relationship like you'd see in the movies. There is such a thing as toxic love. Ah! Hexus! Get out of here! We don't need to see you in there. Go back to Tim Curry. I really gotta be careful of what I say. Anyway, the one thing I do appreciate about cartoons in modern times is that they are more focused on their storytelling, especially when it comes to relationships. I mean, we get to see more depth in the characters and how they interact and how they form good and bad relationships. With cartoon couples, there are some that we can all relate to, as well as finding it very beneficial, while there are some cartoon couples you'd rather stay away from, as well as can't help but cringe the moment they walk into the room. So for this list, I'm going to go over the top 9 toxic relationships in cartoons. Why top 9? Well, because I have been trying to look into other relationships before, but I found at least 9 relationships, both familial, friendship, and your usual romance, for so many reasons that are so cringeworthy, so nauseating, you can't help but have a bucket with you when they come onto the screen. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, and I hope no one else gets sick with this, top 9 toxic relationships in cartoons. Okay, yes, I do understand that Pink Diamond is a very complicated character, and I have been putting her on this list a lot. But bear in mind, I felt like this was important because she represented both healthy and toxic relationships in more ways than one. Now, the reason why I also put her on there is because of some of her bad relationships with the other gems, whether it be with Spinel, as well as that with the other gems. I know she wasn't cruel, but yet at the same time, some of the things she did was a bit unforgivable. One of them was forcing Pearl to keep a secret, and this is definitely where I felt like the relationship was a bit of an issue. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but at the same time, it was concerning on both sides of a party. Pearl wasn't exactly fully independent, She wasn't even thinking for herself properly or even tried to talk Pink out of this horrible decision. While with Pink, she didn't exactly have someone she could be more confident with. I mean, true, one of the things I put it high up on the list is because Pearl was actually think for herself a little bit thanks to Pink Diamond, while with Pink, she had someone she can confide into about certain things that she couldn't do with her fellow diamonds. But in the sad production of things, Pink disregarded Pearl's feelings for her and thus vanished completely, leaving only Steven behind. That makes the situation more heartbreaking. Pearl was stuck with an identity crisis, and this is why I felt like the relationship was toxic in its own right, mostly because it just felt so one-sided. Rose was a true helping Pearl give a sense of identity, but disregarded Pearl as something else entirely and left her alone to deal with whatever's left of her love. This couple is put at number 9 because they developed over time during the series. I mean, true, it wasn't the best. It wasn't completely toxic, but again, as I said before, you can't help but feel so much concern for both Pearl and Pink, and felt like there should have been more better writing. And in fairness to Crooniverse, it could have gotten worse. But I had to put this in here because I just didn't want to ignore those concepts. One of the things you gotta appreciate about the DuckTales 2017 is that there's a bit more improvement with the villains, especially with one particular villain that has a really terrible relationship with one of her own. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, I am talking about Magicka the Spell and Lena. They probably have one of the worst relationships in DuckTales. I really should probably rewatch that. But anyway, Lena was practically a puppet to Magicka the Spell. Practically, Magicka created Lena as a way in order to exist in the planes when her physical body was trapped in Scrooge McDuck's dime. So in order to get back at Scrooge, Lena was practically the only way in. Thing is, she has to win over the McDuck family clan in order to get that access. And sadly, Lena at first didn't have an identity. She always obeyed what her aunt Magicka always said in the process. But over time, she started to become very attached to Webby and the rest of the McDuck clan. She finally realizes just how toxic that relationship is. Even though this is a bit low-key in terms of abuse, it still managed to show a lot of problems with Magicka's relationship. For one thing, she kept manipulating Lena against her will, and true, she wasn't exactly a real person. However, throughout the majority of the series, Lena starts to develop her own identity and was able to break free of that. But the reason why I put it number 8 is because, unlike Rose and Pearl, which is only toxic because of the situation they were brought in, Magicka is very abusive to Lena because she just sees her as a puppet, just her key way in order to do things. She never imagined that the shadow she created in order to preserve herself would have thoughts of her own. But this relationship was probably one of the biggest steps that Disney has ever done in quite some time without it going dark. I mean, like Cinderella dark. But I still put them at number 9 because there are some characters that have worse manipulation than Magicka the Spell can pull with any of her magical spells. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, you hear me talk about the Diamond Authority all the time, and they're practically the physical epiphany of toxic relationships. Well, with White Diamond, she represented the mental abuse, as well as her powers forever tainted us with that horrific nightmare fuel. She was always dismissive, as well as always wanted to do her own things, even if it meant as going far as what had been dealt with in this scene. And of course, with Blue Diamond, she represented emotional abuse, while with Yellow, she represented physical abuse. This caused Pink to have a horrible relationship. So yeah, they were basically a triple threat of abuse. So it's no wonder that Pink was always striking her responsibilities. She was dealt with a lot of emotional pressures from a lot of her fellow Diamonds. And many people who are probably gone through this sort of thing will probably relate to Pink more than we would realize. I'm not much of a statistics person, but I would definitely have to say that if we have going through this so much abuse, especially now, even with what's discussed in Cartoon Network and Steven Universe, it definitely brings off a more pinnacle idea that we do feel some sympathy for Pink Diamond and recognize of how horrible the Diamonds were to each other, period. But the reason why I put them in number 8 is because of the fact that they soon realized of how wrong they were, which is not easy to admit in the realistic aspect of things. But at least they were recognizing of their consequences of their abuse towards Pink, as well as that they were finally able to move on and find something better for themselves and actually tried to make it work thanks to Cruniverse's writing. And to be fair, if it weren't for Cartoon Network, they probably would have something to make it more realistic. So we all know we hate Viren from the Dragon Prince with a passion. And I also include him in number 4 on my hated characters list. But I'm not just including him on this list because of the stuff he did in Dragon Prince. Oh no, I'm actually including him because of his relationship with his 2 children, Soren and Claudia. And I put it further up because it's a little complicated, if you will. So, on the one hand of a spectrum, it usually focuses on the abuse of poor Soren, who is practically trying to make his poor dad proud, and in doing so, go as lengths of trying to kill the princess in order to do so. But slowly and surely, Viren was starting to see the evil that his father has possessed, and the kind man he may have been trying to see for so many years was far long gone. And it was even by then he recognized of how much of a bad influence he was to the kingdom. And of course, this is what kickstarted Soren's characterization. But Viren is not without its softer sides towards Claudia, who he gets a little protective of her, especially when Arvo starts to kinda take an interest of her, which even for us, kind of gives us a good of concerns of what Season 4 has to offer. But still didn't change the fact of how he was manipulating his kids, practically gaslighting Soren, as well as gaslighting poor Claudia into thinking that he was a good guy. With Claudia, it even brings us bigger concerns of her obsession with trying to keep her father alive. It's understandable now that we know her background since Season 2, but at the same time, the way how Viren handles the relationship with Claudia, it's not terrible, but it still didn't change the fact that Viren was using his kids for his own gain. But again, it's complicated. Poor Catra and Adora. Life in the Horde sucked big time. For both of them, they had their own form of abuse from their mentor, Shadow Weaver. Regardless of whether it was to show favoritism for Adora or monstrosity to Catra, it was that one thing alone that caused a rift in their relationship. And in a lot of ways, this is why I was a little reluctant at first to even ship these two. It definitely came off as a bit toxic and dangerous, but I think part of it was also because of how Shadow Weaver treated the two in the past, always favoring Adora over Catra, which caused poor Catra to try to prove herself as someone worthy over and over again. And then, of course, this is part of a reason why we would always want to boo or practically hiss whenever Shadow Weaver comes onto the screen. Even though her background doesn't give us a whole lot of sympathy for her, the only redeemable thing is that she would always be a half-decent mentor. That still didn't change the fact that she would practically try to use Catra and Adora to get her own sense of gain of power, especially when the Black Garnet was smashed. You have to say, you were practically cheering at that point when Catra finally destroyed the connection with the Black Garnet with Shadow Weaver. And of course, when Shadow Weaver finally decided to go to the castle of Moonstone, she definitely became a bit of a hindrance. And of course, Adora rightfully is on guard with Shadow Weaver. She's been with her long enough to know that she would manipulate anyone to try to at least get some form of power, even with the Black Garnet gone. Power hungry and obsessive, there was nothing that Shadow Weaver could do just to able to screw everyone over, even not above screwing Adora by trying to fry her brain out in Season 1. Things even get a little more complicated when she suddenly pulls the sacrifice in the last season. It didn't exactly redeem her, but it definitely put everyone, including the fandom, up in arms about it. But I wasn't even sure how to feel at that moment. But I felt like it was more toxic than Viren's because, in some ways, she just still viewed everyone as a toy and didn't exactly show any remorse to what she has done. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Firelord Ozai family is actually on this list. Firelord Ozai was a very ambitious and not above hurting his own kids in order to get what he wants. He basically had scarred Zuko physically, mentally, and emotionally, and practically banished him from his homeland, forcing him to go on the hunt for the Avatar in order to gain whatever sense of honor he has left. So of course that concept is pretty infuriating for the rest of us. Not only that, but we also have Azula, who is basically not above manipulating her own friends as well as manipulating her brother in order to screw anyone around. So yeah, she definitely is the living definition of a sociopath, which has the capability of killing others. She shares her ambitions with her father, as well as tries to prove herself worthy. So yeah, Zuko's not the only one with daddy issues, and basically Ozai doesn't give a crud about it in more ways than one. Though it's a shame that he only been shown a short amount of time, because it would have been nice to explore furthermore. But it didn't exactly change the fact that his influence over the family was practically a toxic waste ball. And that's right, of course, Zula was not above of hurting her uncle, as well as Ozai could care less about him. Thankfully though, Iroh's fine. Zuko is finally free of that toxic relationship, as well as Azula and Ozai finally going to jail. However, it still didn't change the fact that this was probably a higher level of abuse in the cartoon world than any of us could possibly imagine. So of course, when we first meet Amity, she comes off as shallow, despicable, as well as a two-faced girl who will stomp on anyone to get what she wants. So your stereotypical mean girl that's very smart. Talk about double threat. But we definitely learn a little bit more about her, especially through convention, as well as in understanding Willow. Turns out the reason why she was so mean as well as vicious towards Willow is because of her parents, who are high-ranking people. And Willow was at her birthday party that one time. Her parents practically forced her to end the relationship with Willow because she was a weak witch. And this is horrible. I mean, seriously, what sort of parents actually blackmail their kids to end their friendship just to prevent them from going to a particular school using their influential power? In a lot of ways, that's just wrong. Thankfully though, Amity actually has support from Willow and Luz, and it does have a high potential of breaking through that horrible complexity relationship that she has, as well as that I feel like some of that toxicness from the other parents, Amity's parents, are also affecting the twin siblings in a way where it may not be harmless malice now, but may become something worse later in the future. I don't know how serious. But still, I put them at number 3 on this list because using that sort of power on the kid is just mentally abusive. Very high-ranking mental abuse than any of us could even imagine, as well as it being so real and relatable. Poor Lapis, there's always a reason why I would put her in the sympathetic gems department. She has been in a mirror for thousands of years, prisoned against her will, and of course had to go into a poisonous relationship. And then of course you have Jasper, a warrior gem who hates herself, as well as having no sense of purpose in her life now that the truth has been learned about what Pink Diamond had done all those years ago, as well as being forced to go back to the very planet that she was ashamed of. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, they are the number 2 toxic relationship on this list. They are just both bad in so many levels. Jasper always gets very aggressive and abusive with Lapis, while with Lapis, she has to use every ounce of her power just to make sure Jasper stays in line. And that wasn't very easy considering the fact that they're A fusion took the form of this abomination in Jailbreak. So yeah, actually an associate of mine had basically told me that real-life malachite is explosive in water. So yeah, this relationship was practically a ticking time bomb that was just waiting to happen. Thankfully though, Lapis realized of how toxic their relationship was and was actually able trying to go and move forward with her life, even if she may never do fusion again. Even though we have yet to discuss that concept in the future. And then of course with Jasper, she has her own problems she has to deal with, especially now that Steven shattered her and then brought back to life, up to the point now where she'll even have to find some way to get her act together. So basically, the reason why I put these number 2 again is because the two of them are just the worst relationship represented. They are just controlling, practically choking each other's potential, up to the point where I even wonder when it would ever end. It felt like an eternity as the season kept progressing, as Garnet liked to put it.
They are really bad for each other.
What sort of rhyme is this?
Oh no, she's starting the number 1.
There are no words to describe how bad this couple is. Well, okay, probably a dictionary full of them would probably work, but technically, they were probably bashed down or considered underrated for this couple. And I'm pretty sure for some of you who are DC fans would probably agree that this couple has to be the worst. Ladies and gentlemen, Joker and Harley. That's right, these two are the number 1 toxic relationship in the cartoon world. More ways than one, Joker is a psychotic maniac and a narcissist who would do just about anything to get what he wants with Batman, even if it means put poor Harley in harm's way. And Harley is so infatuated him, which even for us is beyond cognition reckoning, is something that we can't really pinpoint on. Even the 2020 cartoon Harley Quinn, it was practically a nightmare. This relationship, it's just horrible.
No, I'm kidding. Today's very good when I'm meeting my fellow DC fans. I'm always bombarded with Harley and Joker, and they are always going to be the pinnacle of pain.
Without a doubt, these two are the worst pairings ever, with Joker practically putting Harley in harm's way, beating her up whenever he has a fit. These two have to go through the worst relationship that anyone has ever seen. Just don't ever let these two be a couple. Not even in the multiple versions of Batman, with the exceptions of alternate universes, would this ever be considered a great cartoon couple. Well, folks, I am basically done with this video. If you like what you see, feel free to do a like, subscribe, and remember to throw a few comments about cartoon couples which you found very nauseating whenever they appeared on the screen. Also, do a subscription, and this is Dragon Veil signing off and ready to try to cleanse myself of what I had just reviewed. Bye-bye!